Hey, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Amy.
Welcome to United Humans, a podcast that goes into the personal lives of our 6,000 plus volunteer medics and their families.
75-year-old male, possible cardiac arrest.
My name is Gabi Friedson.
I'm Dina. This is Ronnie. We're a couple.
I'm Vicky.
United Hatzalah's only mission is saving lives, and we'll discuss how that doesn't leave room for discrimination against color, race, religion, or sexual orientation.
Let's talk about fear, trauma, pain, and connection.
Join us. Let's discuss these diverse volunteers from all across the country. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to United Humans. Amy and Sarah here.
So happy to be back.
Yay! So, wow, this is really crazy. I'm going to say the story because I think this has to be said, that for whatever reasons, the person that was supposed to come in today wasn't able to make it. We'll just blame it on Corona. And only last night at, what time was that? 4:35? I called Yosef Rimmel, also mostly known as Yogi. That's how people refer to him. And I said, hey, what are the chances you could come in today? And here he is. So first of all, Yasher Koach, and thank you so much for, I don't know what, changing around your whole schedule to be here. And just, we're so grateful that you're here because you have so much to tell us. So welcome.
It's my pleasure to be here, and I'm very happy to be here. And I'm certainly happy to be able to help out in any way I can for United Hatzalah. And at the outset, I want to apologize because I've been in Israel now for 32 years. Before we made Aliyah, my wife thought we would become bilingual, and after 32 years, we are non-lingual in 2 languages. So if I make a mistake and I'm looking for a word in English or in Hebrew, that's just because, maybe a little bit because of my age, but certainly because you just don't remember all the words anymore.
All good.
I was just wondering, where's your accent from? Is that Chicago, I hear?
No, it's born in St. Louis and then afterwards in Chicago.
What? I totally heard Chicago.
No.
See,
You have
I'm
to be
from
careful
New York,
now.
so what do I know?
You know.
You're all the same.
Us Midwesterners all stick together.
Wow. Okay, St. Louis. I would never guess that. And so you made Aliyah.
We made Aliyah in August of 1989 from Chicago with 3 children, and then subsequently we had 2 more children here after we made Aliyah.
Wow.
2 of them live in the Etai, and one lives in Talmon, one lives in Ashkelon, and our youngest lives in Yerushalayim, is not married yet, lives in Yerushalayim.
Oh, wow. I'm going to Talmon for Shabbos. How do you like that? And you, when you made Aliyah, where did you move to originally?
Straight to the Etai.
Wow. Okay.
Right.
So for those who don't know where that is,
It's right in the middle of the southern Shomron. It's about 15-20 minutes north of Hashmonaim or Kiryat Sefer, right in the middle of the country. Really, if you look at the map, right in the middle of the country, or as you're landing or taking off from Ben Gurion Airport and you see the lights up in the hills, that's us.
wow. And that's not the most typical place for an American to make Aliyah to.
There, certainly at the time when we made Aliyah, there were about 120 families there, not that many English speakers. There were a few people that we knew or kind of knew when we made Aliyah, and since then the yeshuv has more than doubled, almost tripled, and more English speakers. Some of our friends came because we moved there, so we're very happy there.
And were you an EMT in the States before you came?
So I started out my first aid career, I believe the first class I took was in Boy Scout camp. We had a from Boy Scout troop from the Young Israel of St. Louis, obviously in the previous century, in the 70s. I took a first aid class then, and I was bitten by the bug. After that, I took first aid courses from the American Red Cross, and I was an official first aid instructor for the American Red Cross. I used to teach classes for Camp Moshava, B'nai Akiva, and the Hebrew Theological College. So I was not an official EMT, and then when I came to Israel, I took an EMT course and became a volunteer EMT.
Because I know that you were one of the first volunteers of United Hatzalah as we know it today.
Right. We were just discussing that. I think the first night in 2006. So I think there's 300 and something volunteers at the time, and I'm very proud to say I was one of those 300, however many they were. There were 500 original mirrors, communication devices and they started out with number 1, 2, 3, 4. I think they skipped some in the middle.
What number are you?
No, I was number 505 or something like that. I wanted to keep that number because it showed how long you'd been with the organization. But then when they introduced the new radios and they divided up the numbers by area, so my number today is 7170, but that doesn't mean anything.
So just for context purposes, we are talking about United Hatzalah officially started, meaning it was running even before 2006, but it officially became an organization in 2006 with 300 and something people, and Yogi was one of them. And today, in 2021, we're 6,200 volunteers. So you really are a trailblazer and a pioneer in this organization, and that's incredible.
Thank you. At the time, I was still working just outside of Beit Shemesh. So the Beit Shemesh branch was probably 20 or something volunteers, and I was one of the original there. And then in the Beit Suf, there was a branch of the regional councils called Binyamin, the Benjamin Regional Council, and at the time there weren't that many volunteers, but the Binyamin Regional Council is the largest regional council in Israel. It's spread out over an incredible amount of space and many, many different yeshuvim. And since then, it's become a lot more solidified, and we have today in the Beit Suf, and as well as the Binyamin is divided up into two different parts, east and west as well.
Wow. So I think that's a good segue to just kind of understand territorially, is that a word?
Territorially.
That's what I meant to say. Where you're located, from my understanding, you are surrounded by quite a lot of, let's say, not Jewish population,
Right.
Arab towns, villages.
Right. There are a number of different villages around the Beit Suf, and we, all of the EMTs in the area, take care of anybody, both car accidents on the road, and as well as there are many different instances and cases where our Arab neighbors have brought their injured or sick family members to the front gate of our community, and we're called to treat them, certainly to give them first aid, to stabilize their condition until they eventually a Red Crescent Sarah Dome ambulance comes to get them. They obviously take much longer than we do to get to the situation usually, and we stabilize them. And I was just telling you that in the past year, we have successfully performed resuscitation CPR on 2 Arabs that were brought to the gate of our community. They were clinically dead, and they left alive.
Wow.
So this has come up also in the Gush, where they talk about Palestinians coming out of Section A into Israeli territory and calling 1221 or calling whatever for help. I want, and like you said, and I want you to say it to the world, how important this message, that these are not the stories that make the news. The stories are, right, when we're terrible and horrible. So can you talk to us a little bit about that in terms of why are they leaving their own cities and coming to us? And
so first of all, their EMS system is nothing like ours at all, from what I understand. But there have been many instances where there may be a doctor in a specific village, and maybe they took the person to the doctor in that village, and he'll say, go to the gate of the Beit Suf, because we have the equipment, we have the knowledge, we have the capability to stabilize, to start treatment, and until, again, very often the response time of the Sarah Dome ambulances could be 20, 25, 30, 35 minutes even. And we know that without really a whole lot of response time is the name of the game anywhere. And if no one treats somebody for the first half an hour, 35 minutes, even someone who might be only mildly or have small injuries, if the bleeding is not stopped quickly, if an IV is not started as soon as possible, etc., then a situation which you might call not serious could get serious a lot quicker.
right. And how to get these stories to the front pages? Got any comments on that?
I will be very honest. I've been trying to do that, certainly from our point of view, both from our yeshuv, from our community point of view, from our local council point of view, and I know that the spokesperson of our council has turned to different press organizations, and it seems it's not a story. I don't know why. I know in Gush Etzion, especially in Efrat, they have a emergency response center in Efrat, and I know that they have made it to the news. I don't.
For Beit Lechem.
Right. I don't know that that we are so different than other places. We as Jews know that it's our job, it's our position, that we have to treat everybody as soon as we can. Tikkun Olam, world, help me out.
Rectification?
No, whatever.
Fixing the world to be a better place.
This is what we do.
In the world.
It's our place in the world to treat, to help whoever we can as quickly as we can, as long as we know how to do it, and that's what we do. There is an old adage that says, "Dog bites man doesn't make the news, but if a man bites a dog, then it does make the news." So I guess it's expected of us to treat anybody and everybody, and we do, and there's never a question, and it happens on Tuesday mornings, and it happens on Friday night in the middle of Kiddush, and it happens on Shabbos afternoon in the middle of our Saturday afternoon nap, and it happens 24/7. And I think this point, it happens, and we treat it. And I want to bring up one thing, because when I brought up now about that it happens during Friday night dinner after Kiddush or before the soup or whatever, I think that this, I have to say that probably the most important people in any organization that deals with first responders are the spouses. In my instance, my wife and children, whoever else is waiting for me before Kiddush or after Kiddush or after the soup or whatever it is, because as long as they know that we as first responders have the backing of our wives and husbands and families, and we go out and do what we do. And I think they are equally, if not even more important than we are, because they allow us to do what we do, and they get all the credit in the world.
Such an important point. So shout out to Shulamit, is your wife. Shout out to Shulamit and your children for being there. I want to touch on 2 points that you just said, and then I'll hand it over to Amy. Just one thing is that we've never brought this up, and I think that you might be the right person to address this. When you get a call and you know it's for a Muslim, or maybe you don't know, right? But it's a Friday night and you have to be Machal Shabbos, I want to make it clear that halachically, I want to say I'm no Rav, but for sure from the policy of United Hatzalah, you're allowed to break Shabbos in order to save someone's life without knowing whether they're Jewish or not Jewish. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And the second thing I want to talk about quickly is obviously a much bigger topic, but the other side of the coin is that you've also been to a lot of terrorist attacks and piguas. So I don't necessarily, I don't know how much you want to go into it, but if you can give us 1 or 2 examples of situations that you've been in where you've had to deal with that situation. I
have been at a number of terrorist attacks. Some the results are not. We had no necessarily. We were unfortunately we didn't have much to do. I will say that I was at a terrorist attack less than a month ago, right outside of our community, where a soldier was run over by an Arab car at a checkpoint. And it was right after, as a matter of fact, right in the beginning of, right after I was walking home from Shul in the evening, right after Marav, and we got the call, and I jumped into my car, and this soldier was laying on the ground with many, many people around them. An officer who said at some point maybe he had some first aid training, but he really wasn't treating this soldier, and he had 2 broken legs, and it was weather that was pretty wintry, rather chilly, and people were standing around. They didn't really know what to do, and the ambulance certainly didn't get there yet, and I got there first, and I treated his leg, and put him. We got a stretcher, put him on a stretcher to get him off the ground. We put a thermal blanket, I believe is what is the word in English, put him around him so he wouldn't lose any more body heat, and we got him off the ground, and we started treatment within literally 2 to 3 minutes after the call, after the incident happened. No one really knew if there was going to be a follow-up to that ramming attack or him being run over. The one terrorist was captured at the spot. There were a lot of people who were. It has happened that one terrorist attack is followed by a second one, and thankfully that soldier. I mean, I haven't really followed up after the day after this the situation, but he's going to be okay now. And again, quicker you get there. And someone once told me many years ago in a course we took, even sometimes as soon as someone shows up with an orange vest, that's already at the beginning of treatment because they know they're going to get treated now. They know they're not just going to be late. It's psychologically, exactly. They're just not going to be laying there with people looking at them, not knowing what to do. So that was less than a month ago. I've been to other, like I said, often that I've been to terrorist attacks. There really wasn't a lot for us to do, but you don't necessarily know that until you get there.
I know that there was a very terrible story a few years ago that was became very well known. Would you want to touch on that? I know there was nothing you could do by the time you got there, but it was a story that people were familiar with. And I'm going to touch on something that we didn't discuss previously. I was the Solomon family. Were three of the members of the Solomon family were murdered in their house on Friday night as they were waiting for to start a Shalom Zachar Friday night in the summer. And there was really nothing for me to do. I was the first EMT there, the third or fourth person into the house. But I want to say that after Shabbos, at the time, the person who was head of the psychotrauma unit kept calling me to make sure he wanted to know how I was, because again, on a first aid EMT basis, there wasn't anything for us to do, but we saw things that we saw, and he wanted to know who else was there, and many other members of the management of United Hatzalah called me right after Shabbos, wanted to see how I was doing, because again, it was a very terrible attack, especially since the person who was killed was a very, very close friend of mine. He sat in the row in front of me in Shul since we moved to the Yishuv, and I don't remember his name today, who was the head of the psychotrauma unit at the time, and he kept calling me, and I kept saying, I was in the middle of this, in the middle of that, and we had to take care of some things after Shabbos, and he kept calling me and texting me, and he said, I'm not going to sleep until I speak to you tonight. Wow. And I think that speaks volumes for what the organization does for its volunteers. Absolutely.
That actually is a great segue. I wanted to ask you, because you're one of the first volunteers in United Hatzalah, and you've been through so many different kinds of calls and emergencies and terror attacks, and I'm really interested in your relationships with the other volunteers, and not just the Jewish volunteers, but we have many Muslim volunteers. We were speaking more about Muslims who come to your yeshuv to get treated, but what about your relationships with some of our volunteers from East Jerusalem, or Haredi volunteers, or the people who aren't necessarily fit your mold?
So in Beit Shemesh, there are all the molds. There are no Muslim volunteers in Beit Shemesh, but Haredi, Dati Lumi, Dati, whatever, we all work together. All of the types and flavors. We all work very well together. We all get along very well together. Back before COVID, we would have we would go away for Shabbos together, Shabbat Gibush. We'd all get along, and there'd be people there with a Strimal and white socks on top of their pants, and people like me in a regular just white shirt and dark pants on Shabbos. And we all get along. We all talk to each other. Often we do go to each other's family celebrations, and we get along very well. I personally, except for maybe once or twice, have not had a lot to do with other Muslim volunteers. I have been to a couple of car accidents where they've been to, and we're all the same. There's no difference. When you're driving down a highway and you get a call that there's an accident, a couple kilometers one way or the other, it's whoever can get there first can start treatment, and we work together very well.
A lot of people heard about the story with your son's car accident and your daughter-in-law and your grandchild, and maybe that's why when they heard the name, Rimel, that rang a bell for them, maybe not. I don't even want to be the person to tell over the facts, but I would love if you would share with us the facts of, in general, and also takeaway. And I'll just tell you from our point of view, sitting in the media department of United Hatzalah, we are hearing how many stories a day of horrible car accidents and this and that and really terrible things. And then, not to make this more important than anyone else who has a heart attack or a car accident, but as soon as it becomes your family, it puts it in a different tier. So as soon as it was, this horrible story happened and the father is one of our own, it became a family. I don't know how to say it.
No, everyone really took the story to heart, and everyone was keeping updated on what was going on and what was happening, and we'd love to hear from you. I mean, it not just affect his son, but also the grandson,
right?
And
entire family.
So I think also what we spoke about before about what the organization does, not only for their patients, but also for their volunteers. The car accident happened about midnight, a couple of minutes after midnight on December the 1st, 2019. It was a multiple car accident. There was an Arab who was driving his car and hit my son, daughter-in-law, granddaughter, and grandson were in the car, and the murderer hit them doing 174 kilometers an hour from behind, which is about 110 miles an hour. Multiple ambulances were dispatched to the scene. My daughter-in-law was killed on the spot. My granddaughter was killed on the spot. And my son and my grandson were still alive. My son was taken out of the ambulance first. The first two, I believe, that were taken out were my daughter-in-law and my granddaughter. I'm not exactly sure, but because it was such a large-scale accident, 5 or 6 different ambulances were there, including one of the United Hatzalah ambulances who had just finished. They had just finished doing a shift at a local basketball game at the arena in Malcha, and they got the call, and they were there, and they took my son. They took my son to the hospital, and then a different ambulance took my grandson. When my son got to the hospital, they stayed with him. They had no idea that my son was my son, and they said, "Who can we call for you?" And my son, who already, it seemed it was rather evident that he was paralyzed from his waist down, with a spinal cord injury, and he gave the guys who brought him our phone number, and they said to him, "You sure it's okay? Maybe we should call a neighbor to go over and tell him." And my son said, "No, my father is a volunteer for United Hatzalah. You can call him." And that was the first time they knew that. So they called me. My son remembered the phone number off the top of his head, which in and of itself is a big thing today, because nobody remembers any phone numbers. You just swipe your phone.
Only your parents.
That's right. And he called them, and they waited until I got there. We took us probably about 40 minutes. They waited until we got there to make sure they wanted to know if we needed anything. They already knew, and then they spoke to me. In other words, he had identified himself, and then I spoke to my son, and then I said, "What about everybody else who was in the car?" And he said they're being treated, which I understood. And we got to the hospital. They waited for us at the entrance of the emergency room of Shar Tzedek, and they stayed with us and they wanted to know what else we could do. And at some point, we needed to get a hold of my daughter-in-law's family, and I.
Wait, at this point, you and your son knew that he had lost his wife and his infant?
Yes. I didn't know that until we got to the emergency room.
But he knew.
He knew. Yes, he knew. Just an interesting point. I mean, he wasn't operated on until 5:00 the following afternoon. So even though he was totally aware and made a number of decisions about what to do, where to bury my daughter-in-law and granddaughter, and a couple other decisions, donating my daughter-in-law's corneas. He doesn't remember that at all. In other words, the last thing he remembers is when he started that drive that evening on the way home, and the next thing he remembers is when he was about a day or so after he woke up out of the coma. When they woke him up after his coma on day 15 or 16, that's when he starts to remember. But he was totally aware, totally awake, and that whole part of that 15 hours, 16 hours were totally erased. So the 3 guys who were on that ambulance waited until we got there. Then we had a problem getting a hold of my daughter-in-law's family, and they woke up Eli Pollack, who is the
CEO. Of United
CEO,
Hatzalah.
okay, of United Hatzalah, 2 o'clock in the morning, and he did whatever he did and got a hold of my daughter-in-law's family, and they also got a hold of Laser Hyman, who was also a personal friend, but they called him up, and he came immediately to the hospital to see what he could do for us, and
He's the director of the the AGAF. How do you say AGAF? Department
Department
for
of
Volunteers.
Volunteers, right? So he's a personal friend from other things that we do together. I'm also a volunteer firefighter, and so is he. And he came immediately to the hospital, and I needed to, at some point, to go to the hospital where my granddaughter had been taken to identify her and whatever. And he stayed with me. There was a lot of bureaucratic red tape that took a long time to get through, and Laser just, I don't know, he was calling people because there were people that were on vacation and they were in America, or I don't know where they were, and he just kept calling them because, you know, he had to take care of one of his own.
We'll cut the tape.
And as much as possible. And then Moshe Teitelbaum, who is the Yosef Rosh today, he came that next morning as well, and we needed to ask a very critical question about my son's care, if he should stay in that hospital, go to a different hospital, and he got through to Rav Ferrer, who is one of the leading medical experts in Israel about where to do different procedures. And he got a hold of him within an hour or two, something that's
Which is
really,
a miracle.
Really, in and of itself.
Anyone that's tried to ever reach him, you know that's a miracle.
Usually, you know, you try and reach him when you know you have a few days to get a hold of him. And I spoke to Rafael personally about 11 o'clock that morning. So, you know, everybody in United Hatzalah got together and said, you know, this is one of our own, and we need to, not just treating the person, my son, at the accident scene, but they helped the family during those really crucial, critical first hours.
Wow.
Was it hard for you in the months after to go out and volunteer and to do your regular?
So for the first month, I was basically in the hospital, probably about 16, 17 hours a day. So I didn't really do anything. But later on, when things got a little bit more stable and we understood where everything was going to be, then I carried on doing what I did, which I think, and at the time I didn't even put two and two together. But in August of that year, there was a case right outside of Beit Shemesh.
Right, I was gonna say
that's right, in a place called Stot Micha, where a family had gone for vacation. They were in a Zimmer, a vacation home.
House, yeah.
Okay, and they
pool.
had a son who drowned in the pool, in the backyard pool of this house, and I together with two other people from United Hatzalah from Beit Shemesh, we were the first people on the scene. Someone else had already pulled him out of the pool, but he was also, I guess you would call it, clinically dead. And we started CPR, certainly basic life support, until more volunteers came and until the ambulance came, and eventually he was evacuated by helicopter from the scene. And then I believe a week or 10 days later, we all joined together at Hadassah Hospital when I think the day or two before he was released from the hospital, healthy and I'm bringing that up because his name, Noam, which is the same name as my granddaughter's, which I hadn't really put together until someone brought it up, because at the time I didn't really ask his name, but the two Noams, met through me.
And your daughter-in-law's name?
Tzippi.
So Tzippi, there at Noam was 3 months, 4 months?
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Right.
Whew. Pause. And then how long was your son, and your son's name is?
Ephraim. Ephraim was in the intensive care unit in a basically medically induced coma for 2 weeks, and then he spent another 2 weeks in the hospital, and then he was for 7 months in neurological rehab in Tel Shomer. He is today, as they say, independent in his wheelchair.
Paraplegic?
A paraplegic, and he just about 6 weeks ago, finally got a car that he was able to drive
I
with
saw
hand
that.
controls.
I follow him on Facebook.
Oh, very good. Good for you.
Yeah.
Wow.
So now he's
Unbelievable.
he's driving around. My grandson.
How old is he and what is his
Etai is
name?
14 now. Last year, I think certainly all the people that follow the story on
mitzvah.
Facebook, etc., celebrated his bar mitzvah a little bit more than a year ago.
I cried watching the video.
We all did, and he's still in rehab. He comes home every weekend. He comes home Friday night, Saturday night. He is certainly physically. He is. They had to amputate his leg below his left knee, so today he still needs to he will probably have one more surgery on his leg to straighten it out. He's already started to walk with a prosthesis, but it's not working. So they have to do this one more procedure to straighten out his leg. And the goal is for him to, we hope, after Pesach to start to go back to school 2 or 3 days a week and day rehab 2 or 3 days a week. And he's almost a totally typical 14-year-old boy with all the good and all the bad, but obviously we don't really see the bad. But
And cognitively?
cognitively, he's totally there. He absolutely he still has a little problem with some of the sometimes with a short-term memory, but very slight, and he speaks a little slowly. But I would say some of the jokes that he's brought up in terms of I will say one of the jokes that he himself said recently when we went for for this consultation about his leg, and he asked me when we were waiting for the doctor. He said, "Saba, why are we only doing this surgery today? Why didn't we do it, over the last 2 years?" And I said, "Well, I want you to ask the doctor that, because the doctor who was taking care of it and who's going to be doing the surgery has been all the care has been at Shaare Zedek Hospital, which has to get an unbelievable shout out because they are, as far as we're concerned, the greatest hospital in the world."
Wow.
And I said, "I want you to ask the doctor that." And the doctor explained the surgery and explained everything what he was going to do. And I said, "Okay, Etai, ask Dr. Label your question." And Etai thought for a second. He said, "Dr. Label, why are we doing this surgery only today?" And the doctor said, "Well, Etai, it's a very good question. I'm glad you asked me. And I'll tell you that we weren't really sure that you would ever get to this point where this surgery would become that necessary. But you did." And he looked at him, and with a total straight face, Etai said, "Well, you never asked me. I would have told you." and he didn't rehearse this before, and no one told him to say that. I mean, so I think that pretty much says where Etai is today.
Wow,
I want
what
to
a
bring
kid.
up a very special moment. I'm also a video editor here in Hatzalah, and I believe it was your brother-in-law, your uncle?
My nephew.
Your nephew donated
My nephew and niece.
Your nephew donated an ambucycle in honor of Etai and Ephraim,
Right. In honor of Etai's bar mitzvah.
none of his bar mitzvah.
Right.
And as I was editing the video, there was this very special moment where Eli, we would love to have him on the podcast, but we're not sure about his level of English.
He doesn't speak English.
But
Ali
he-
Azulai.
He works in our Moked and
Dispatch center.
in the dispatch center, and he has a prosthetic leg. And he came out, and I'm going to see if I can maybe get a little portion of the clip that we can share with the podcast viewers. He came out and he was speaking to Etai, and they really had this beautiful connection. And he said, I'm waiting for you to join me on the soccer field, or something like that. Like
He
I'm
plays
waiting
volleyball.
for
He plays
you
volleyball.
to join me to play, and it was just. I watched it so many times. I said, "Wow, like that could be." He and not only that, he's at Hatzalah, and his grandfather is one of the first United Hatzalah volunteers, and it was just a very meaningful moment. I wanted to know from you, how did you feel in that specific time?
There had been a couple of other people that up at that point had spoken to Etai that were also amputees that have gone on to lead, totally independent, active lives. I believe Eli not only did he play soccer and volleyball, I believe he also is a mountain climber, if I think, or something like that.
Rock climbing.
And he said, he goes, Etai, once you get that prosthesis going, and obviously the way, I mean, we've learned a lot about prosthesi over the last 2 years, but the prosthesis that he's going to get now is really just, it might need to be changed because he's going to continue to grow, and all of the new technically advanced prosthesi, like a blade and those things, that they only really get until they're probably 18, 19, 20 years old. So he said to him, as soon as you're ready, whatever you want to do, whatever, the sky's the limit, and I'm there for you. Yeah. You want to go skydive, I think I skydived also, and mountain climbing, whatever you want to do, you call me up, you tell your Saba, he knows how to get a hold of me, and I've done it all, and I'll do whatever, I'm there for you to help you do any of those things.
And just to mention, he lost his leg in an accident as well.
Right.
So he...
Etai, he seems so strong and so motivated to continue, and beautiful.
Remarkable kid.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone who follows the story on Facebook, he's a remarkable child, and they've obviously been through so much trauma. I want to turn it to you for a minute. Amy touched on how it affected you responding to calls. With obviously you took an appropriate month off or whatever, but would you talk for a minute about the trauma side and the I'll say something interesting. People keep mentioning to me with Corona, what's interesting is that the medic and the patient are in the same boat for like the first time ever, right? Where in usual circumstances, you're either the medic or you're the person receiving. And I think in this case, you really kind of switched sides. You were the receiver in so many ways. So I'd be curious to hear about your experience emotionally. And
I think in the very beginning, it wasn't so much emotion. We were just running on
adrenaline.
On?
Adrenaline?
Adrenaline, that's it. Adrenaline, certainly for the first 2 weeks. Etai's life was certainly was unclear, even for more than the first 2 weeks, if he would really survive. And Ephraim's problems, certainly his life and death problems, were pretty much, while they were maybe even more difficult for Ephraim in the first than Etai's the first day or two, but the life-threatening issues were resolved certainly within the first 3 or 4 days. And now it's the life-changing issues which you'd have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And Etai, certainly within the first 2 or 3 weeks, it was not clear if he was going to survive. And even once it was clear that his body was going to survive, no one really knew neurologically or cognitively how he was going to survive. And he proved everybody wrong. Wow. That's just the bottom line. He did. Today, when he goes back, and he's gone back a number of times for procedures or certainly for doctor's checkups, he goes back to the pediatric ICU, and he walks in, and not only is he taking a victory lap, showing everybody, it's him, but everybody there sees it that it's their own victory, because here it was, they had this 12-year-old boy at the time who was really his life was in the balance. And, it was a success case, and a very successful case. And when he goes back to the surgical unit, he gets the same. He thinks that they're going to change the name one day to Shari Tzedek Etai Rimel Hospital. And certainly the pediatric surgical department, he walks in, and everyone walks over to him and gives him a hug. Wow. And even in Corona, even in COVID, they're giving him a hug, shaking his hand, and, it's a big emotional boost in both directions.
Well, I think you need a little bit of teenage confidence, it's not that helps you in those situations, probably. Yeah. Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, you and your wife and your family have been through. I can't imagine. It's so traumatic, and I don't know. I don't even know how to compliment you, because I don't even have the words that would even come close to exemplifying your heroism and your commitment. I'm just so blown away by everything you and your wife Shulamit has done for Ephraim and for his children, and Etai, of course. And they should have a continued refuah, continued health, and please God, we should only celebrate good things together.
Amen.
Amen.
Do you go out to car accident calls the same way you used to do in the past, or are they a bit triggering for you now?
No, I think when there's a call now, you turn that off. That's all. You have to go to, I mean, yes, the car accidents are in the back of my mind, but just even recently, a month ago, we took the day off. My wife and I were shopping. We had a couple of errands to do, and we were, I don't know, about 3 or 4 minutes away from a car accident in the middle of the country, Tzomet Bilu, and I got a call on not only on my phone, the application, and on my what do we call them?
Bluebird?
On my Bluebird, and it was a car accident. There were 4 or 5 injured people. None of them nearly as seriously, but which is got the call. We were literally 2 minutes away. I got there, and one actually 3 ambulances ended up taking everyone back. Taking everybody to the hospital, which was right across the street from Kaplan Hospital in Rehovot, and it was a car accident. And you turn into EMT mode, I think is the way to do it, and that's it. It's not like I see my son in the car or my grandchildren in the car. The victims today, or the people that are hurt today, they need to be dealt with today, treated today, and that's what we do.
I think that's one of the what we've seen. What connects different kind of volunteers is what you were saying before, that in Beit Shemesh you have all these different streams of Judaism. I think that this mode that EMTs can turn off and focus is what connects them after, that they're able to go out and save lives and just focus on that. And that's like I think that's a special connection that you all share. I'm not sure I myself could get in that zone without letting the emotions in that particular moment.
I think that has to be part of who you are in order to really do this, because leaving any kind of terrorist incidents on the side, car accidents can be some gruesome scenes, which I've been to also, and I know there are people that and I know that there's help available, but there are people that have PTSD from those sites as well. In other words, car accidents can be very unpleasant scenes. So can any other kind of trauma, someone falling, even falling down a flight of stairs and breaking a leg in such a way that the leg is totally misshapen. There are people that later on have nightmares from that and things like that, and there is help available for them, obviously, but it's something that has to be part of you have to be able to turn it on and turn it off, otherwise you'll never sleep at night.
So I've spoken to Dovi Meisel about this so many times, and he's explained it to me, because at the beginning when I first joined Hatzalah, I really didn't understand this. I really didn't understand how it's like gears of a car. Like, how do you go from like this gear to that gear? You leave your Shabbos table, you go deal with, a suicide or a child, and then you go back to your Shabbos table and keep eating your chicken. Like, how does that work? And it's interesting. I've heard many different, I don't want to say explanations, but different ways or techniques. I'm curious, do you have a technique that works for you specifically, or is it just like gear on, gear off?
I don't know if you're going to leave this in, but Scotch helps. But,
it's okay. Do you not see Dovi's posts every single Friday on Facebook?
No, I don't. I'm not. But
he's always l'chaiming his.
That's right. Do I have a specific? I don't think so. I just think that it's something that you have to know that this is what I'm going to do. The call is now at 1:10, and hopefully I'll be back in 10 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour. And when I get back, then I go back to where I was. You have to learn how to do it. It's not. I will say that there are times that I've come back when the results were not as positive as we would like, whatever, and so you get depressed for a little while. And I've been to car accidents where after, and I didn't necessarily know the person, where the people did not survive in spite of or because of or our best efforts, and not just my best efforts, but many other people were there too, and from other organizations as well. And
you just have to compartmentalize.
You just have to realize, and sometimes there was more than once where I came home. I remember one time from a baby who was at a gan in the afternoon, and the baby didn't wake up, and it was really very difficult afterwards. He didn't wake up, and no matter what we did, we were unsuccessful. So it's something that you have to understand, and it could be that if I would have gotten a call an hour or two or the next day, maybe I wouldn't have gone out. It's possible. But it just worked out, and then when the next call came, I went back to do what I had to do.
It looks like you give yourself this. Maybe that comes with experience, and I actually wanted to ask a different question, but maybe it comes with experience that you know when to not go to a call. Give yourself the space to recover before you go to the
Okay,
next one.
but sometimes depending on what the call is, I mean, you don't want to necessarily. If there's other people that are going to get there, then okay. If there isn't anybody that's going to get there, and it's something that's you never know what a call can be, and very often something simple can turn out to be not simple at all. So it's not like anyone wants to think, oh, do they really need me or they don't really need me? So you don't want to really have to make that judgment sitting at home or watching TV or playing on the computer and saying, oh no, it's just a nuisance call. I mean, you don't necessarily want to do that.
What about, I want to hear from you, you really have perspective in how United Hatzalah has grown. So being a pioneer of this organization and a real trailblazer, like, do you like nachas? Like, how do you say nachas in English? Like, pleasure's the
I think
wrong way
everybody
to
knows
say
what nachas
it.
means.
Well, we don't, not all our audience is Jewish.
Right, okay. I think that Ellie Beer's goal of 90 seconds, being response time 90 seconds, so in the cities, certainly with the ambucycles and whatever, it's a lot, it's easier to accomplish. And when he came out with that, I remember it was like, shooting for the moon. But if you don't shoot for the moon, you're not going to get there. And that's what he did, and that's how successful we are. But I, number one, living in an outlying area and working in an outlying area, when I'm able to respond to any of these things, it may not be 90 seconds, but no one else is going to get there for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes. So when I get there after 3 minutes, it's I think that's even a greater accomplishment, because today, like I said, when I first started out in Beit Shemesh, I was the only guy from Beit Shemesh south all the way to almost Kiryat Gat. If anybody wants to look up on a map, I mean, I was putting on a lot of mileage sometimes. And today...
Which he is not reimbursed for.
Yeah, that's correct. Absolutely not. But the car's from work, so it's okay. Today, all these years later, I know that there are other people that have taken the course, that are active volunteers in the different moshavim in all of the area between Beit Shemesh and Kiryat Gat. Also,
villages and towns.
In the different communities, and also in my community in Beit Suf, there was always a Magen David ambulance, but that was the ambulance went out. It doesn't mean, and until everybody got to the ambulance and went out, it took time. And as a first responder to get to the situation, whatever it happens to be, if it was trauma, if it was someone who was having a heart attack, or somebody who was having a stroke, or somebody who wasn't feeling good for whatever other. And by the way, there are still respiratory problems in the world, non-COVID related. I want to say that because today everybody thinks that someone who has short of breath has automatically COVID, and it's not the case. There are still, and I have a very good friend who's a pulmonologist in Chicago, and I say to him, I said, you're not out of work, right? I said, all the things that you took care of before, you're still taking care of. Sure. And so all those things are still out there, and so the fact that even in outlying areas, the response time has been cut down tremendously by the growth of the organization. I personally, that's where I get the most satisfaction out of being part of the organization.
Wow.
And I was wondering if you, because you've been in Hatzalah so long and you have so much experience, are you a mentor for any younger volunteers?
Sometimes when volunteers first finish taking the course, then they're not allowed to go out to a call by themselves. So I have done that many times, both in Beit Shemesh, a little bit less in the Beit Suf, but yes, I've done that many times, and it's sometimes it's a little scary because you don't want to teach somebody to do something wrong, and obviously someone who just finishes a course today in certain areas might remember certain things better than some of us who don't. But on the other hand, usually the experience makes up for whatever lack of memory I have, and so we get along, and I don't think it's necessarily a case of I'm the senior, listen to what I'm doing, but I think they usually also understand that, let's see what really needs, how to do it so that they're able to learn from us.
Experience.
Well, I mean, I think a mentor in any sector is so important because they learn from your experience, and maybe they can call you after something happened, and they can say, I'm not sure if this went right or this went wrong, and I'm sure the only gain is what I'm trying to say.
Usually that's the case, and usually what I try to do, if there is somebody younger there, after the person is on its way to the hospital, I'll say, okay, what did we do right, what did we do wrong, or how could we have done this better? But oftentimes, and I really believe sometimes less is more, and the most important thing, our job is to get the person, certainly in trauma, get the person ready to go to the hospital, because somebody who's multiple trauma and serious trauma, they need to be on the operating table. They don't need to be in the back of an ambulance. They don't need to be treated, even though I have all the equipment that I need. But they need to get to the hospital as quickly as possible, and that's what our job is, to get them ready to get to the hospital so that the doctors and the nurses and everybody else can treat them at a much higher level than we can ever give them in the field.
Do you have any parting words or parting wisdoms you would like to share with our audience?
I thought about pretty much everything that you might ask me, except that. I just think that just go back to what we just talked about before. The idea of cutting first responder response time down to as little as possible, on one hand, sounds so simple. I mean, really, we've got to get somebody there, start the treatment as quickly as possible, so that certainly in an urban area, and today, I was in Jerusalem driving around, traffic is sometimes just terrible, and you can't, so whoever can get to the scene as quickly as possible, stabilize the situation, I think that is really the pinnacle of what this organization stands for. Again, in the urban situation, where I don't really live in a specific urban place, the ambucycles and the motors and the bicycles and all these other things, it just means that someone is going to start treatment 90 seconds or even less. And as a matter of fact, even not necessarily in a totally outlying area, but even I could be driving around and I'm now on my communication device. I'm on the Jerusalem channel. And it could be that I'm driving down a side street, and the call could be the house in front of me. Right. And it sounds simple, but no one did it before. And I think that's what this organization does, which is unbelievable.
Which is why we call it the Uber of life saving. That's
right, because you're there. It could be 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Rarely, I will say rarely, do I ever get to a call after the ambulance. It happens sometimes. But rarely, and not just me, any of us, we get there before because we're closer. And nobody, there used to be a thing, you can't put a soldier every two meters or every 2-3 feet to protect the country. Sure. You can't do that. You can't put an ambulance on every street corner. I mean, you just can't. But if you can get a volunteer, not on every street corner, but as spread out as possible, so that the response time is cut down as little as possible. That's what this organization, that's what Ellie Beer speaks about all the time, and I think really it sounds so simple, and obviously it's not, because this organization has a lot more today than it did when we first started together, but that's the parting word, that the success is, the more people we have, the better we're able to respond as quickly as possible.
And I'll add to that, if I may, two of the most powerful things I heard when I first joined United Hatzalah that stuck with me forever was that, Dovi Mizell said, ambulances don't save lives, people do. It's just as simple as that. And then at some point I said I'm going to say the word that must not be named, which is all politics and ridiculous, of course. But that I did say to Ellie Beer at some point, hey, what is the difference? At the very beginning, before I really understood who United Hatzalah was, what's the difference between Mana and United Hatzalah? And he goes, 7 minutes. That was his answer. And I was like, oh, okay, got it.
That's
it. Sometimes
it's
just
correct.
The simplest thing can be so powerful, and we see it, that's the power of the stories that we see time and time again. So simple, someone so close, save the person's life, and it's as simple as that, but You need the amazing volunteers like you who have been through so much and still go out and save lives every day. I'm always just amazed, and thank you for everything that you do.
Yeah. On behalf of all the people of Israel, because I'm clearly their representative, thank you for all your many, many years of service and volunteering and
mentorship. I think that's so important. I'm so happy to hear that you
Absolutely.
mentor the younger volunteers going into the next generation. So important.
And thank you for coming so
Yes.
last minute. This is such a powerful episode. It's heavy, but there's a lot of very strong messages in it. And just thank you so much for taking the time to come and sit with us today.
My pleasure, and I hope we can all keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the United Humans podcast.
Share this with a friend, subscribe, and we already know you're going to leave us a positive review, so we'll just thank you now for that.
Bye.
Adios.